The first time I saw her, she was lying motionless beneath the broken red gate of an old forest shrine, half hidden in a patch of weeds, her fur matted with mud and pine needles. Her body was thin to the point of vanishing, each rib a sharp ridge beneath torn skin, as if her skeleton was trying to break free. Her head twitched weakly as I stepped closer, and that's when I saw them. 3 kittens huddled against her, barely the size of my palm, their mewling so soft it sounded like leaves trembling in the wind. I had come to this quiet corner of Totori looking for silence, hoping to lose myself in the slowness of village life. But silence has its own language, and that morning, it screamed. I didn't know their names then. I didn't know how long she had been fighting to stay alive for them. But I knew, with sudden clarity, that if I walked away, they'd all be gone by morning. And maybe, some part of me would go with them. The shrine was maybe 2 kilometers from my house, half swallowed by forest, with moss curling over stone steps and cedar branches blotting out the sky. I'd passed it a dozen times while walking, always assuming it was just another relic no one prayed to anymore. That morning, it became sacred for a different reason. I crouched slowly, heart pounding, afraid I'd scare them, or worse, confirm what I feared. The mother's eyes fluttered open. They were dull, unfocused, but burning with something primal. She didn't move. She couldn't. But her gaze locked onto me as if to say, "Don't you dare take one step closer to my babies." The kittens, on the other hand, were squirming. One kept trying to climb onto her back, another hid under her paw. The smallest just shook, its breath coming in tiny, panicked jerks. I didn't have gloves, food, or even a carrier, just a worn canvas satchel and a pulse that wouldn't slow down. I whispered gently, trying to let them hear the softness in my voice. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." The mother didn't believe me. She hissed, lips peeling back to show what few teeth she had left. It wasn't loud, it was tired, ragged, but it was enough to freeze me. That moment stretched out, heavy and uncertain. I didn't know if touching her would kill her. I didn't know if I should even try. But then, the tiniest kitten crawled toward me. I didn't think, I just extended my hand, slowly, carefully. The kitten brushed against my fingers, its fur damp and sticky. It made a sound, not quite a cry, more like a question. I scooped it into my satchel, wrapping it in the only thing I had on me, a flannel shirt I'd meant to wear later. The mother tried to rise. That broke something in me. I called Emiko right there on the trail. She used to run the only vet clinic in the next town over before retiring. No hesitation, just told me to bring all of them to her place. Move gently, don't talk, keep them warm. Getting the other kittens was easier, as if they sensed I was taking them somewhere safer. But lifting the mother, that felt wrong, like touching something sacred. Her body was burning with fever. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. I didn't think she'd survive the ride. At Emiko's, everything shifted into instinct. Blankets, fluids, a heat lamp set over a cardboard box. The kittens huddled together, their eyes searching every corner of the strange room. That's when Toma showed up, my neighbor, arms crossed, frown deep as a riverbed. "You're bringing strays into your house now?" he muttered. "Don't let them get too comfortable." I didn't answer, not then, because the mother was still breathing, barely. And even though Emiko warned me not to hope too soon, I had already started hoping anyway. 2 days passed. Shizu, that's what Emiko started calling the mother, was hanging on, but only just. She hadn't eaten, hadn't moved. The kittens nursed from her instinctively, but it was clear she was running on something other than strength, some kind of fierce, dying devotion. Then, that third night, something changed. I'd fallen asleep in the corner of Emiko's spare room. The cardboard box was beside me. Around 3 a.m., I woke to a scratching sound. At first, I thought it was a dream. Then I saw it. Shizu, dragging herself out of the box, her legs trembling, her body like smoke trying to hold shape. She wasn't heading toward me. She was trying to leave. She collapsed halfway to the door. I rushed over. Emiko, barefoot and bleary-eyed, came in right after me. "This might be it," she whispered. But there was no panic in her voice, just that resigned calm you only get after seeing too many good animals die. We lay her back down, but the twist wasn't death. It was what Emiko found the next morning. Shizu had been tagged. Under the fur behind her ear, a faint tattoo, nearly faded, a number. Someone had owned her once. Someone had let her go. And according to Emiko, That number traced back to an illegal breeder who'd been shut down years ago. Shih Tzu wasn't just a stray. She was a discarded life from a world built to break animals. Suddenly, this rescue wasn't just about survival. It was about justice. Emiko stood in the kitchen with the tag number scribbled onto a slip of paper, her hand hovering just above the old landline phone, fingers trembling with a hesitation that didn't suit her. Morning light cut through the rice paper windows, casting a pale gold across the tatami floor where the kittens lay curled together, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect, innocent rhythm. Shih Tzu was still alive, barely, her breath rattling softly, eyes closed but no longer darting beneath her lids like before. She looked peaceful, though everything about her story now suggested violence, abandonment, and long stretches of cruelty hidden behind closed warehouse doors and forged papers. The thought of her once being bred, discarded, left to decay under a shrine gate, it sank into me like a slow poison. Toma came by again that afternoon, his steps heavier this time, his face unreadable. He glanced once at the kittens and didn't speak. Instead, he walked to the edge of the porch and lit a cigarette, letting the smoke drift into the open air. I didn't expect sympathy, but what he said next cracked something loose in my chest. "You planning to keep them, or just drag them through more dying?" His words weren't cruel, but they were heavy, born from some place I couldn't name yet. Maybe loss, maybe experience. I didn't answer him, not because I had nothing to say, but because I had too much. Inside, I could feel it starting, that pull between doing what's easy and doing what you'll carry forever. News of the rescue traveled faster than I expected. By the 5th day, whispers stirred through the village like wind through the bamboo groves, soft, low, and everywhere. At the corner store, 2 elderly women paused their conversation when I walked in, their glances brief but sharp. A boy I didn't know pointed to my coat pocket, where Miso now liked to hide, and asked if I was starting a zoo. It wasn't cruelty, not really, just discomfort, the way small communities react when something unfamiliar tugs at the seams of routine. But the real shift came with the landlord. He arrived unannounced, standing just outside the porch with a clipboard in one hand and an exaggerated smile stretched across his face. "I've been hearing about the animals," he said, voice smooth like wet stones. This place wasn't really meant for pets, especially not several. His eyes drifted toward the box Emiko had set up under the kotatsu, where Nori was peeking out, half curious, half defiant. I tried to reason with him, but I could see where this was going. He was worried about damage, liability, whatever excuse made the conversation feel practical instead of heartless. Later that evening, Emiko made tea in silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower than usual, not sad but weighted. They'll need a decision soon, a home, a future, or someone else will make that decision for them. The words sat between us like a second pot of tea neither of us wanted to touch. That night, as the rain began to fall in soft, deliberate sheets against the tin roof, I sat cross-legged beside the cardboard box, watching the kittens sleep. Kiko had climbed halfway onto my leg earlier, purring so quietly it felt more like a heartbeat than a sound. Miso was nestled against her mother, still so small I worried she'd disappear if I blinked too long. Shih Tzu, though, hadn't moved much. Her breathing was steadier, but her eyes, when they opened, held something ancient and weary. She wasn't just fighting to live, she was deciding whether it was worth it. I couldn't shake the question, was I doing this for them or for me? The idea of letting them go, to a shelter, to some faceless adoption form, felt like cutting out a part of myself. But what if staying meant trapping them in a life I wasn't prepared for? My days had been quiet before all this, predictable, comfortable. Now, everything was measured in feeding schedules, delicate baths, and the silent, binding weight of responsibility. Emiko said the heart makes promises the hands might not be able to keep. I didn't answer her then, because deep down, I knew she was right, and I still wasn't ready to know what I would choose. By the 9th day, the kittens had started to play again. Tentative steps over folded blankets, sudden dashes across the wooden floor, tiny paws batting at dust motes suspended in the afternoon light. Shih Tzu, though still thin and slow, had begun to raise her head, following their movements with eyes that no longer looked through the world, but into it. It was the first time I allowed myself to think. Maybe they were going to make it. That illusion shattered the following morning. The back door had been left slightly ajar, just enough for a determined body to slip through. I hadn't noticed until I reached for the food bowl and realized Nori wasn't there. My pulse surged. I searched the room, the hallway, behind every cabinet. Nothing. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the ground was slick with mud, and paw prints scattered across the porch in every direction. We spent hours combing the woods, calling his name until our voices broke. Emiko remained calm, focused, but I saw the tension in her shoulders, the worry she didn't voice. Toma showed up halfway through the search, holding out a flashlight without a word. As dusk fell, Nori still hadn't returned. Something in the rhythm of the rescue cracked that day. The illusion of control slipped through our fingers. I lay awake long after midnight, door cracked open, ears straining for a sound that didn't come. One kitten lost, one link broken, and all I could do was wait, for him or for the guilt to settle deeper. In the days that followed Nori's disappearance, the house shifted into a kind of quiet that wasn't empty but watchful. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of wind through the bamboo behind the house had me glancing toward the door, heart poised on the edge of hope and dread. The other kittens seemed subdued at first, curling tighter into each other when they slept, rarely venturing far from their mother. Even Shizu, who had begun eating soft food from Emiko's hand, spent long hours gazing toward the porch like she expected something or someone to return. I found myself talking to them more often, narrating my mornings, reading aloud from whatever book I had on hand, just to fill the silence. Kiko would climb into my lap and press her small head under my chin, purring in that deep rhythmic way that seems to rearrange the air around you. Miso had taken to following me room to room, dragging her stuffed cloth mouse by the tail, watching me with eyes that didn't blink unless I did. They weren't just animals anymore. They were everywhere, in the folds of my routine, in the decisions I hadn't made yet, in the way I hesitated to answer calls or emails that hinted at returning to my former life. Emiko noticed. One evening, she simply said, "They're changing you." I wanted to deny it, but the truth sat too close. I hadn't just rescued them. I'd let them nest in a place I hadn't realized was empty. But with Nori still gone and no word from the local shelters or villagers, the bond we were building felt delicate, like we were pretending a family wasn't missing one of its pieces. And none of us knew how long we could pretend. It was the 12th day when Emiko laid out the question I'd been avoiding like a cracked mirror. We were sitting outside beneath the overhang, rain dripping in slow, steady taps from the gutter. Shizu was asleep inside with Miso curled against her belly, and Kiko was playing with a ribbon someone had tied around a bag of rice. Emiko didn't look at me when she spoke. She just kept sipping her tea, voice low. "If they stay, they'll need more than your heart. They'll need a life you haven't built yet." The words didn't sting. They settled. Truthful. Heavy, not cruel. I stared out at the tree line, still half hoping Nori might step out from the shadows like a ghost forgiven by the forest. But he didn't. He hadn't. And that weight pressed against every thought. Was I keeping the others close because I loved them, or because I was afraid of losing more? That night, Toma came by with something wrapped in a cloth, an old wooden box with a faded bell collar inside. Found it at the edge of the creek. Thought it might be his. He didn't say Nori's name. He didn't have to. I took the box and held it like it might still be warm. Later, after everyone had gone, I sat by Shizu and whispered the only truth I had left. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I couldn't go back. But I also knew this: if I kept them, I was choosing a life I hadn't prepared for. If I gave them up, I'd be choosing regret. And either way, it would cost something I'd never get back. The day after Toma brought the collar, I finally found myself standing in front of the village shelter. It was a squat concrete building on the edge of the neighboring town, surrounded by wire fences and forgotten toys. Inside, the air was disinfectant and despair. A receptionist handed me a clipboard without asking questions. She must have seen the look before, someone caught in the limbo between love and practicality. I stared at the empty intake forms for a long time, too long, but I couldn't write their names, not even one. Back at the house, Emiko was already packing supplies, extra food, soft bedding, medication refills she'd quietly ordered. She didn't ask where I'd been, just gave me a look, deep and knowing, the kind that passes between people who've already heard each other's thoughts without a single word spoken aloud. "I can take them," she said, "if you can't." There was no judgment in her voice, no pressure, just space. Space for me to admit what I wanted, or to walk away without shame. But I couldn't speak. Instead, I bent down beside Shizu, running my hand across the patch of fur where her ribs no longer showed. She leaned into the touch without opening her eyes. A quiet act of trust that shattered me more than any confrontation ever could. The kittens were asleep, all but Kiko, who watched me with eyes wide and unblinking, as if waiting for the words I still hadn't formed. Somewhere in the woods behind the house, a crow called out and the sound echoed, sharp, final, like the end of something soft giving way to something permanent. I still hadn't made my decision, but I knew I wouldn't sleep until I did. The next morning came slow and gray, the kind of light that seems undecided, hanging somewhere between storm and stillness. I watched it creep across the walls, touching the corners of the room where shadows still lived. Kiko stirred first, stretching beside my leg, then curling against my side like a question she was afraid to ask aloud. I hadn't moved all night. I couldn't. Every time I tried to sleep, I heard the sound of that clipboard sliding across the shelter counter, the quiet weight of my own hesitation pressing harder than any yes or no. Emiko was already in the garden, her sleeves rolled past the elbows, kneeling in the soil with the precision of someone who knew when to act and when to wait. She glanced up once, gave a small nod, and returned to pulling weeds. She wasn't going to ask again. The choice was mine now, unspoken, but everywhere. I looked at Shizu, still curled protectively around Miso, her breathing slow but stronger. Her eyes opened as if she felt me watching. There was no fear left in them, no pleading, just quiet presence. She wasn't waiting for rescue anymore. She had survived, and now she was just being, and somehow I knew that was the point. When the knock came, I didn't expect it. Toma stood at the door, his expression unreadable. He didn't step inside, just handed me a worn envelope. Inside were photos, faded, water-damaged, of another litter, another time, another regret. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Because sometimes someone else's silence shows you the path you already knew you had to take. I didn't make the decision like some cinematic breakthrough. There was no music swelling in the background, no flash of clarity. It came the way all real choices do, quiet, slow, already living inside me before I had the words to say it out loud. I stepped out onto the porch with Kiko tucked inside my jacket, her tiny claws hooked gently into the fabric near my collarbone. The breeze carried the scent of wet cedar and damp earth, and somewhere in the distance, a bird I couldn't name was calling again and again, like it was trying to remember something it had forgotten. I found Emiko still tending the soil. She didn't look up. I didn't ask for help. I just spoke the words as they came, like breath. "They stay, if they'll have me." She paused, not to be dramatic, but to respect the weight of what I'd said. Then she smiled, barely, just enough, and kept digging. Later that day, I cleared the back room and laid out soft bedding, old sweaters, a shallow dish of clean water. I carried Shizu there myself. She didn't resist, just blinked once, slow and calm, like she understood. The house felt different then, not heavier, not louder, just fuller. It was no longer just a place to sleep. It had become something more, a promise made in silence, with no contracts and no guarantees. And yet, when the light faded and the kittens nestled in close, I couldn't shake the thought that someone was still missing. Nori's absence wasn't a wound anymore. It was a shape I'd come to live around, like a room with one closed door. And sometimes, you keep that door unlocked, just in case. Some rescues don't end with a photo of a happy cat basking in a sunbeam, or a perfect home with clean dishes and new toys. Some end with a quiet room, a heartbeat close to yours, and the knowledge that you stepped into something messy, something sacred, and chose to stay. Weeks passed. The kittens grew stronger, bolder, louder, full of life. Miso learned to climb the kitchen chair legs. Kiko slept in my laundry basket, often on top of my shirts. Shizu gained weight, and with it, a dignity she hadn't lost, just buried. Her eyes followed me now, not with fear, but with a kind of calm watchfulness, as if she, too, was learning what it meant to trust. I never stopped looking for Nori. Not really. I left bowls out under the porch, left the door cracked open on clear nights. I imagine him watching from the trees, curious, proud, wild in ways the others never were. People ask if I'll do another rescue. I don't know. This one wasn't planned. It just found me, like most things that matter do. But I know this. Love doesn't always announce itself with certainty. Sometimes it arrives in hunger, in exhaustion, in a soft body curled beside yours at the end of a long day. Sometimes it leaves scars, and sometimes it leaves you more whole than you were before. So if you're watching this wondering what you'd do, maybe ask yourself a quieter question. What would you carry if you didn't have to? If this story stirred something in you, maybe a memory, maybe a question, maybe just a moment of stillness, you're not alone. These quiet, complicated rescues, they don't always make headlines, but they change lives, sometimes even more than we expect. If you've ever opened your door or your heart to an animal in need, I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. Share this video with someone who understands what it means to carry something fragile and fight to help it heal. And if you want more stories like this, raw, imperfect, but honest, consider subscribing. There's more ahead. Not always tidy, but always real. Thanks for being here, and wherever you are, keep the door cracked open, just in case.